Now, recently the Wilberforce Faith and Belief Report was released, which explores the spiritual landscape in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And the top three reasons people gave for exploring faith was going through trauma, life changes, wanting to explore different spiritual practices, and seeing people who live out an authentic faith, who walk the talk. Something that has sort of been evolved within the traditional church context. I've been speaking to a few pastors, reading about it, that traditional congregations, a lot of them are seeing their congregation shrink. It seems to be a thing, especially since COVID. Now, Love Your Neighbour have actually put together a podcast called Help, My Church is Shrinking, and it's all about offering help to the body of Christ in dealing with the times that we find ourselves within the church landscape. Bruce Edmonds now joins me on the phone from Love Your Neighbour to have a chat about this. Kia ora, good morning, Bruce.
Hi, Lizzie.
Welcome.
Good morning.
You've got quite a fascinating background. Can you just give us a little bit of an insight into your world?
Well, I guess I wear a number of hats, and one of those is with CAP, Christians Against Poverty. I've been involved with them since being in New Zealand, and it's a real pleasure and a privilege to be there. I'm a church pastor in a couple of different churches, and working with Love Your Neighbour that works with a lot of churches.
Yeah.
So churches, I guess, is the common denominator.
Yeah, it's your speciality, right?
I guess, yeah.
Hey, so I've been listening a little bit to the podcast. I actually just listened to it via Spotify. Help, My Church is Shrinking. And in one of the first episodes is a chap there, and he's talking about that our church model, which our traditional church model, is building centered, priest led, with passive attendance. And he talked about how that style of church doesn't actually, not everybody relates to that model anymore. And he talked about making church fit for purpose. What does that mean to you, Bruce?
He does. So that's Paul Milson that you're talking about. He's a fantastic guy from the top of the South Island, and he's been involved with us in our Redemptive Family Church series. So that's how we've got to know him. Church, in many instances in New Zealand, and I guess in the Western world particularly, has kind of lost its way. The people who go to church are wondering why. The sense of purpose seems to be missing. And so when we're hit by a major thing like COVID and our normal routines and rhythms are disrupted, people start to ask the question, well, why do I go to church? What am I doing there, and what's my sense of purpose? And what we're wanting to address is that there really is an important sense of purpose. There's a vital reason that we are church.
Yeah.
And we need to get back in touch with that.
Yeah. What I'm finding from things that I'm reading and people I'm talking is they're certainly wanting a sense of community and connection. They're just not necessarily wanting to do it, as Paul said, in that model. Now, probably offending some listeners, because plenty of people still like to do church that way. That's fine. That's cool. But there's a growing amount of people out there who are just wanting to do something a little bit different. Is that what you're finding through the work and the contact points that you have, Bruce?
Yeah, I guess there's a theme that runs through our conversation with churches that comes out that relationship is really, really important. When you think of how we operate as church and how we interact with people, most of churches, their big event is the Sunday service.
Yeah.
But the Sunday service is not designed to help with relationship.
No.
Most of the time, we're sitting in straight rows, looking at the front, maybe standing and singing, but we're not interacting with each other. And that's something we desperately miss.
Yeah.
And so if our experience of church is just Sunday, then we're not building relationships with people. We're not growing in the way that we're designed to be.
Yeah. Something about COVID, when we got to the point where we were allowed to have fellowship again, but we couldn't have the big church. So a lot of churches sort of went back to the most biblical times, I guess, the home church. And I loved that. There were some people that lived just down the road from me. I could just jump in my car. Actually, no, I think I walked there a few times too. Took me about 20
Very good.
minutes. Yeah. Somebody preached on the screen somewhere at the hub from church. And then there we were having cups of tea, breaking into groups, praying for each other. And I miss that. Like for me personally, I am a sort of a small group person. I prefer one-on-one sort of conversations, and I think you can, the big church thing is fine, but like you say, I think people are just craving that connection, and it's not always happening in every church environment, Bruce.
Sadly, that's true. And when you talk about small groups, and church can be a large small group, and it
Yes.
can thrive in that kind of environment.
Yeah.
When you think of what is the purpose of church, why do we even come together? It's to make disciples.
Yes.
And how do we make disciples? Well, we learn from each other. We learn from doing things together, from being together, challenging each other's ideas. And it's not this sitting in rows being talked to, sadly.
Yeah, and another thing I thought from a younger person's perspective is I was just reflecting this morning. Actually, I was driving to work. So my son, he's long left school. He's 19, but when he went to school, the mode of teaching, and for children now, they're taught, and they call it inquiry learning, and
Mm.
they're taught to think and consider and question what's in front of them and what's been said. Whereas, Bruce, probably for you and I, back in the day when we were at school, they just told us what it was, and we just, you kind of went along with it. And I do wonder if that's part of it as well, that our emerging next generation, a generation that aren't willing just to accept what somebody actually says from a pulpit. What do you think?
Well, it's absolutely true. Not willing to accept is a real factor, but even not remembering is another factor.
Too busy on your
I'm
phone.
a preacher.
Yeah.
I enjoy preaching, and I hope that when I preach, it makes a difference in people's lives.
Yeah.
But I'm also very aware that on Monday, most of the people won't remember what I said on Sunday.
Yeah.
And that's true no matter how gifted we may be in preaching. But what people do remember is the ideas that they came up with. So when you put them in an environment where they have to consider a question
Nice.
and discuss it and come up with their own answers, which you fed into through the preaching, then they remember because it was their idea.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So, I mean, their mind and their heart's engaged, right?
Correct. Yeah. And that's how adults learn. So it's not just children who are going through this change of learning style, but this is something that professionals have identified. This is how adults learn. We don't learn by being told.
Yeah, exactly. I was not very good at being at school and being told what to do, and someone reading out of a book. But I learned as an adult when I went and studied when I was around 30 that I'm a kinesthetic learner. I
Yeah,
learn from doing and being part of something, and that's what you're talking about, Bruce.
that's exactly right. And that's what we're wanting to do as Love Your Neighbour with churches is to help them learn new ideas, different ways of doing things, but by coming up with these ideas themselves. So
Yeah,
we want conversations to happen
that's
as
neat.
whole churches.
That's healthy.
It is, yeah,
I
something
guess.
that doesn't happen very often, but
Yeah.
very healthy.
I guess, though, within that context, if you're willing to let other people speak, they might start asking questions and saying things that you don't have the answer for, Bruce. How do you handle that?
Well, that's a risk, and I guess that comes down to your leadership style. But I can tell you, it's exciting to see a church family come up with ideas, to be engaged with those ideas, and to really see fruit happen. And as a leader, what you're doing is enabling them to go forward.
Yeah.
You're not telling, you're not controlling, and there may be ideas that you've never thought of or even didn't really want to support so much yourself, but we're a whole church family, different kinds of people. We're gifted in different ways, and God uses each of us in those ways. That's how He's made us to be.
Yeah. I guess what you're putting a challenge out there really to Bruce people of letting go of control and allowing conversation and community to take
Yeah,
off in your church, which is what everyone wants, right?
true. So I confess I am a control freak, but
Good confession.
but I've learned that you can actually get what you want in a much easier and fun way by letting people thrive
Hmm.
and encouraging them to thrive.
Awesome. So now people can listen to the podcast, Help My Church is Shrinking. But am I right that you also, there's a program that you can sort of take churches through? Is that right?
That's right. So we call it the Redemptive Family Church series. And this is something that we're wanting to work with whole churches on. So the best way to get involved with this is to listen to the podcast,
Yeah.
see if it resonates with you, and then get in touch with us as Love Your Neighbour. And we'd love to come and talk with your church.
Sounds great. So look up that podcast, Help My Church is Shrinking. I'll put it all up on the website later and you can follow the links. But also, as Bruce just mentioned, check out the website, loveyourneighbour.nz, loveyourneighbour.nz. Bruce Edmonds, thank you for your conversation and your time this morning. Been great chatting with you.
Thanks for the opportunity.